everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Coach Steve Show podcast, where we talk about college football, college basketball, NFL, Chicago Bears, maybe a little NBA, who knows. But we discuss pretty much everything in sports. If any of that interests you, please hit the like button and subscribe button on the Coach Steve YouTube channel. And the podcast can be found literally anywhere you find your podcast. So please follow it, rate it, be a friend, tell a friend, share it out to help out the algorithm that I don't understand. I don't know if anybody understands it, but it does something. So please do that for me. We greatly appreciate it. You can also find the podcast at Colorcast. Colorcast is an app to download only for Apple users for commentating games, any game, any sport you can commentate. You could do live shows, live podcast currently. And it's going to be some couple upgrades. So check it out. Again, it's only for Apple. So go check out Colorcast. Be a part of the movement. It's a huge thing going on with it. The podcast is also brought to you by Belly Up Sports. If you head over to sports.com, check out all of the podcast and blogs and everything there. Thank you, Belly Up Sports, for having this podcast on there. Podcast is also brought to you by Coach Stone Football and is back to the basics, books, and drills. If you go to CoachStoneFootball.com, got all of his books on football drills, practice planning, game planning, and much, much more. You will literally never have to look up another drill again. His first book literally has 600 pages. So go check all that out. Thank you, Coach Stone, for sponsoring the podcast. CoachStoneFootball.com. All right. Took some time off here from the podcast and everything. Merry Christmas to everybody. We're getting up on the new year. So the Bears, they just played the Seahawks in the snow. Bears were down pretty good. They were not going to recap the entire thing. But the Bears did come away with a win from the Seahawks. Sunday after Christmas, 25-24 in the snow. Both teams, the Seahawks had way more to play for than the Bears did. Russell Wilson had an okay game. Nick Foles got a start. He did not have a terrible game. 24-35, 250 yards and a touchdown. He just managed the game pretty well. I don't think he's started a game since 2020 of November, I believe. The Seahawks really did clamp down on David Montgomery. The Bears couldn't get the run game going. Now instead of being 4-10, the Bears are now 5-10. They're out of the playoffs. Seahawks now 5-10. The Bears defense, regardless of getting up 24 points, played pretty well. I was really impressed with the tackling and how the defensive line still held up. Seahawks don't have a great offensive line, but they held up nonetheless with the injuries to the Bears. And then on offense, we just couldn't get the run game going. But Nick Foles was pretty good at the short game. Moved around the pocket a couple times and made some throws. I mean, he's a former Super Bowl MVP. Now, Bears get a win 25-24. It's pretty ballsy not ballsy, I guess. I guess it was a really good decision. They come down and score, so it's 23-24. The Bears kicked the extra point to tie it up. Matt Nagy said, and decided to go for the win, and they got the win, go for two to try to get the win. And then the Bears defense had to step up the way they've always stepped up. The Bears defense, of course, we all know, has always carried them. It's never been an issue or never been questioned. Dan Montgomery had a bigger impact in the passing game. 7 receptions for 61 yards. You saw a little bit of Herbert. Herbert got a, touchdown. I've always said this over and over. If you listen to anything I've put out there on the Bears, why Herbert doesn't get the ball more is beyond me. I don't know why. I know Dave Montgomery is the guy, but 21 carries for Dave Montgomery to 2 for Herbert, and they try to run like an inside zone, and he popped it outside and gets a touchdown, like 2 carries for 21 yards and a touchdown. I don't know why he doesn't get the ball more, or at least put in the backfield. And I've said this many podcasts as to why that doesn't happen. But already I've seen in the big question for the Bears, who should be the head coach, and we've dealt with this all year. Matt Nagy was called to be fired before last year. And one of my friends, Zach Kyleman, who comes on the podcast a lot, he told me, the Bears defense, or the whole Bears organization and fans, had pitchforks going for Matt Nagy, and then they draft Justin Fields, and they said, okay, no more pitchforks, we want him fired. It's always been the same problem. I do agree that the Bears offense could be lethal under the right guy. See, I've seen this before too. There's been posts for people, why are Bears fans so frustrated? It's not even like they're good, is what I've seen posted. And here's the problem that I have with this. The Bears always have a Super Bowl caliber defense, right? Almost every year, that's what gets brought up. Well, the Bears have the Super Bowl caliber defense. Well, the Bears have a Super Bowl caliber defense. Well, the Bears lead the league in takeaways, or the Bears are one of the best tackling teams. Year in and year out, you always hear that. Frustration is you get some guys on offense, but we always get some type of, well, for example, Jay Cutler had 3 offensive coordinators at one time, a couple head coaches. Like there's never been this consistency of getting, and they give guys chances. And I always said this, I'm going to say it again. The worst thing was going the 12-4, I believe, or whatever it was in 2018. That was one of the worst things that could have happened for Bears fans and Matt Nagy, unless we make it to the Super Bowl, which without the doink, we have the opportunity to make it to the Super Bowl. But one of the worst things that could happen was doing so well that year, because now Bears fans' expectation is pretty high. And now you're this offensive guru, you coach under Andy Reid. And, one of my friends said this, if you want the same type of food or recipe, you want the same thing, but you don't have the chef in the kitchen, you're not going to get the same results, and without Andy Reid, you're not going to have Andy Reid results. Now, sometimes it works out where there's some people that work under a head coach. I know I'm speaking in college, but you look at Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley coached under Mike Leach, and he took the offense and tweaked it a lot. Look how good success he's had. So it can work. But, with Matt Nagy, you're not going to get the same thing that you do with Andy Reid. And Andy Reid had to work hard to become that type of offensive play caller. He had to really work at it. He wasn't always like that. We've seen what happened when he was at the Eagles. But, that was one of the things. But yes, for the fans out there, Bears have always had sometimes, not all the time, sometimes, but decent offensive players to where we should be able to move the ball. But we've always struggled on the offensive line with injuries or just not having the competent type of players for offensive line. That's why I was very critical of the Justin Fields draft, because I said we struggle on the offensive line. Why are we not getting offensive linemen? Why are we giving up all these draft picks for Justin Fields when I know Andy Dalton has been healthy, but at the time, he could, that Andy Dalton's not a bad quarterback. You have Nick Foles that's behind him, who's not a bad quarterback, former MVP, everything else. But ever since last year, especially, we've been calling for Matt Nagy's job. People had the pitchforks and they were not rioting it. That's, going too far, but at the pitchforks and everything. If you guys ever watched the Simpsons movie, something like that, I know that's way out there, but if you watch a Simpsons movie, there's a GIF, of this people with pitchforks and fire and everything else. That's what the Bears fans were doing. That's what we were all doing. Oh, let's draft Justin Fields. That will fix it. And people stopped. They stopped wanting him fired up until halfway through the year. Oh, we should fire him again. And I don't like calling for people's jobs as a coach myself. That's one of the things you don't want to do. But in the NFL, an organization like the Bears, in one of the biggest cities in the United States, you have talent. There's things that you're not going forward, is what I should say. So let me, go back to that year in 2018. First year head coach does very, very well. Great. Well, the next year you're expecting, if you go 12-4 that year, you're expecting the next year, now not necessarily going to be 13-3, but you're to be, I would say, to be fair, you're looking at a 9 or 10 win to 13 win season, somewhere in there when you do that. And you're bringing all the players back and adding tight ends and running backs, and you're bringing that defense back. Well, the expectation is high. And people blame Trubisky and stuff, but I digress. We've talked, it's like beating a dead horse. Matt Nagy, yes, exactly. You have to be consistent with success. So that's why I'm saying, like, if his first year he went 7-9 or whatever, the ceiling only goes up. You can't blame them for winning. You can't blame, the offense actually moving the ball at times. Even with Mitch Trubisky, you can't blame that. But you have to be, as the head coach, figure out, okay, we went 12-4. How do we get better? How do we move forward? And I'm going to probably should say this first. I agree. Create stability within the organization. I absolutely agree. That's the next, I guess that's the first thing. So we're talking about Nagy. What about, and I've said this before, if you guys have ever listened to other episodes, and I'm going to be a dead horse, but just nothing has changed. It's the front office. It starts with the front office. And I think they should clean house. It all starts with Ryan Pace as your general manager. Now, in 2018, looked like a genius. We're bringing in Matt Nagy. We have this and that. It looks like a genius. But again, you have to go forward. And who you draft, who you bring in. That doctor at the Bears and the scouts they have, that also needs, I think they should clean house. Get rid of everybody except administrative assistants because they don't dictate how they win games. The game day crew for the Soldier Field, don't get rid of it. And everything like that. Those people don't dictate how you win or lose. Let those people keep their jobs and their health insurances and all that. Let them. But get rid of Ryan Pace. Because many times Bears have drafted guys. Yes, they should have cleaned house when they were going to rebuild. Yes, get a new quarterback, clean house. But they used it as an excuse. Let's save Matt Nagy's job. Let's save our job and go after this big, flashy rookie at Ohio State, which was he's a one-read quarterback, and we've seen it. Holds on the ball too long. He thinks he can't run everybody, but in the NFL, everybody's fast. You're not playing, no offense to these teams, because some of them are moving up. You're not playing Indiana. You're not playing Purdue. You're not playing, some of these teams. You're not playing nobody knows A&M, So in the NFL, you can't hold on to it. But, they did that to save their jobs. And it starts with the owners, but you know what? I can sit here and talk about the owners all I want. The owners are not going anywhere. Owners never leave. They're making so much money. They're not going to leave. And they have these plans to go to Arlington Heights and everything, which is very exciting. It's not very far drive from where we are now. Like all this stuff. It's very exciting. They need a clean house. Ryan Pace needs to go. Assistant GM, whoever needs to go. They need new scouts, and the final straw was, this is not the first time the Bears have not evaluated a player the right way. So whoever does the scouting, the doctor needs to go. And the final straw was Tevin Jenkins when he got how do you not know he has a back issue? How do you not know this is a possibility? And then comes in preseason, I've got to get back surgery. That's the final straw. He's got to go as well. So just from top to bottom, have to go. Bring in new life. And so I'm not as well educated on who should be a GM, because that could go all over the place. There's people that work in front offices that, I'm going to be honest with you, maybe this is bad podcasting, that I don't know. I don't know every single person that works in a front office of an NFL organization. And I highly doubt many people do. You'd have to look that up and figure out who they are. I know some people for the Bears want to bring in Lance Briggs that care about it. Kreutz, he works up here in the Chicagoland area and everything else. Yes, owners are concerned with what makes them more money, commercial aspects and everything else. Yes, that's all they care about. Unless you're like the Patriots. Now, they make money, but you had Tom Brady and you're making money, but you're also winning. There's some out there that want to win and do everything it takes to win. But yes, they only care about money. So again, I don't really know who could take over for Ryan Pace, but at this point in time, I don't know where you go wrong. A big name out there would be Louis Riddick. He's the former Eagles director of personnel, and he works on ESPN and everything. I'm going to read, why they think maybe for him. I'm going to read this word for word. While Louis Riddick has become a fixture on ESPN, he has made a name for himself in the front office roles in the NFL in the past decade. Plus, Riddick spent 13 years between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington football team, where he served as the Eagles director of pro personnel from 2010 to 2013. And he had the same role in Washington from 05 to 07. He is someone who has gained steam as a GM candidate for his knowledge of the game and ability to communicate. Riddick has made it clear he's interested in GM opportunities. So I think that's a good one. That's a big name that's been brought up. Now, he's if you look at top 10, he's at the bottom. Some have put out names. Champ Kelly's the Bears assistant director of personnel. No. And I'm sorry. You already work there. You're done. We just got to clean house. If there's anybody that works for the Bears right now, they should not be office anymore making decisions. Omar Khan, he's the Steelers vice president of football and business administration. He's been with Pittsburgh since 2001. He served as an administrative coordinator. He was promoted to director of football administration in 2011 before he got to 2016. Before the Steelers, he worked with the Saints from 97 to 2001. He isn't the expected successor as GM in Pittsburgh. I think it's feasible that he could look elsewhere. So, I mean, that's an opportunity. He's seen the Steelers. He's seen how they've built it up now and how they can hire the right head coaches too. They don't really go through head coaches at all. That's another good hire, I think, that they could go for. There's a couple other names. Some I don't agree with. One from Texas, Houston Texans. No. One is Will Mcclay. He's the Cowboys vice president of player personnel. He's someone who has been coveted general manager option for many teams over the years, but for all intents and purposes, McKay is content where he currently is at the Cowboys vice president of player personnel. He served several roles with the Cowboys since 2009. He has been praised for his ability to bridge gaps between ownership and coaching staff, scouting staff, and players. So, I mean, that's another one, but I'm not going to read every single one. I don't know some of them. Again, these are guys that you just don't really hear about too much besides Louis Riddick because he's at the ESPN, but he does have great knowledge of the game. My only problem is he talks highly of Matt Nagy. So I feel like if you got rid of Ryan Pace and hired him, is he going to keep Matt Nagy? I don't think so, but he always tries to defend him a little bit. So that kind of takes me back a little bit. But for GM purposes, you might have to go with him. So overall question of this podcast and everything is, I don't like going for guys as jobs, but I think Matt Nagy, it's time to go. Again, you're not seeing progress things going forward. Well, they've made the playoffs a couple times. I don't want to hear about the wild card last year. The Bears would not have made it. And then you go down to this year, and the excuse is going to be, well, they have a rookie quarterback. That's the problem. I don't want to hear excuses. It's results, and it's the NFL. And it's time. Again, like we've already said, you've got to see progression forward. So if you're 12-4 one year, the next year you've got to go 9 or 10 wins to 13 wins, somewhere in there. Now, if he would have done 7-win season and then we're getting to the 8-8 or the 9-win or whatever, okay, then you keep him. But when you're supposed to be this offensive guru and you're not seeing the points on there, so Matt Nagy probably needs to go. They need to clean house. So who should replace Matt Nagy? I'm going to go over some names that are on here and, give you my why. And I'm going to tell you who I think probably should when you're looking at the whole landscape. So a couple of people that get on here is who should replace Matt Nagy. And one of the top names out there, there's two, and one of them I'm okay with. The other one I'm not. And we'll get that is Brian Leftwich. He's the Buccaneers offensive coordinator. Now, here's the thing with the Bears. The Bears just don't believe in firing coaches before the season's over. I believe at the time I'm on here that the Jaguars, I think, I can't remember the other team, they've got permission to talk to Brian Leftwich about their head coaching positions because I believe in the NFL, the new rule is this week or next week. Organizations, if they get permission and everything, they can start talking to guys to be head coaches, even if they already have a head coach hired, I believe. So that's going to be pretty awkward. He is one of the hottest head coaching candidates this offseason. Offensive coordinator Brian Leftwich for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's loomed under Bruce Arians. They've won a Super Bowl, but he has Tom Brady. It's going to be quick to say that Tom Brady's the reason why. Leftwich had a top offense with Jameis Winston back in 2019. Leftwich has called plays for the Buccaneers the last 2 seasons where he's had a chance to build an offense. And looking for a coach, the Bears want to focus on a bond between Fields and his next coach. So Leftwich is a very good person to probably hire. Now, with this, yes, you're kind of running Bruce Arians' offense. Now, I'm sure Leftwich has his own little twists and everything on there. But having played in the NFL, I believe, at the position, he's probably learned a couple things from Bruce Arians, probably learned a couple things from being around Tom Brady, excuse me. So learning around Tom Brady, that would probably be pretty good because even though I'm not a fan of the Justin Fields, bringing a guy like that in and saying, okay, this is how Bruce Arians does offense. This is what we did. Now you have a more mobile quarterback because Justin Fields is going to be the quarterback of the future, even though I don't like it. It's going to be that way. So he could probably relate to Justin Fields a little more, probably be able to call an offense for Justin Fields and what he has in the offensive line. Because that's what Bruce Arians would do. So he's learned a lot. So that's not a bad hire. That's a big name getting thrown around. I would not be mad with that hire, but I do think they really have to interview him well, and we have to really think about this hire because you do have Tom Brady. I mean, you have Bruce Arians and Tom Brady. There's a reason why your offense is working, but still, you got to give him a chance. Another name, which I don't think will happen, so this will be pretty quick, is Josh McDaniels. He's the Patriots offensive coordinator now. He went to Denver, tried it out. He had Tim Tebow, won some games, and then he's back at the Patriots. I feel like McDaniels is probably just sitting back, waiting to be Patriots head coach, or he doesn't want it. He tried it at Denver, but just didn't like it. Nothing wrong with that, but his name gets brought up all the time because he's an offensive guy. It's always going to be there. The Bears actually interviewed Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels for their head coaching vacancy in 2019 before they hired Nagy after 1 year as an offensive coordinator in Kansas City. I like McDaniels. I just don't know. I don't know if he likes it. It's nothing against him. I think he likes just being an offensive coordinator. I think he likes working for Bill Belichick. He's achieved a lot in New England of course, with Tom Brady. And he's figured out how to move the ball a little bit without Tom Brady. He could come in and pretty much, very well much heal the Bears offense. He really could. His first coaching stint was back in 2009 with the Denver Broncos. It's been 12 years. He's learned a lot from them. But again, it's just one of those things where I feel like he's got a sweet gig. So not saying that the Bears couldn't use him or want him. I just don't know if that's going to work. Another name I've seen is Kellen Moore, Cowboys offensive coordinator, which is crazy because I think he's 33, which is insane. Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore is going to be a popular head coaching candidate. He's had a lot of success with the Dallas Cowboys offense. He's helped develop Dak Prescott into a elite quarterback. They're saying that he could maybe do the same with Justin Fields, who has similar skill set. Yes, and one of the biggest concerns is his lack of experience. He served as an offensive coordinator for 3 seasons with the Cowboys. So with the Bears, they've got to be careful when they're going after this. No, not Jay Gruden. We don't want any type of Grudens here in the Chicagoland. But the Cowboys did go after Nagy just after 1 season offensive coordinator. My only fear with Kellen Moore is, again, the lack. He's 33 years old. How's he going to? Apparently, he can probably handle talking to these adults. But it's a difference between talking to these adults as an offensive coordinator than as a head coach. But maybe since he is younger, he could relate to some of these guys more from an offensive mind. Just let the defense do their thing. I think we need to keep the defensive staff. They're doing pretty well. But now Eric Bieniemy. Now, here's the thing. That's the next name. Offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. I'm going to say his name wrong, and I apologize. Offensive coordinator for Kansas City. Now, here's my thing. Is he really the offensive coordinator for Kansas City? Or is it really Andy Reid, and this guy just kind of helps him out? I just don't know. A player's coach would help Justin Fields, and I think it would help the whole Bears locker room because I think Nagy lost the team last year when he called out the defense, and the defense has to do their job. And I'm like, why would you call them out? Your offense isn't doing anything. And then this year he's kind of lost them again. Here's the thing with like NFL and a couple things. I don't think the Jaguars will ever hire anybody that's associated with Ohio State. And I don't think the Bears are going to hire somebody associated with Kansas City or Andy Reid anymore because they tried this thing with Matt Nagy. Now, Matt Nagy only had 1 year's offensive coordinator experience. So that should tell you a lot. So to hire Coach Bieniemy, I don't know. Now, I would like to sit here and tell you, yes, it could. But even here on this article that I'm looking at, because I'm just using it for my own, sake here looking, they said the failed Matt Nagy experiment, the Bears are going to be weary of poaching somebody from Andy Reid's coaching tree. Now, is he going to be a disaster like Matt Nagy? No, he's been there a couple of years, the Super Bowl and everything else. So I wouldn't be necessarily mad at this hire, but it's something that they need to be weary about because, again, do we really see assistant coaches from like a Bill Belichick go do well? No, they might have a little bit of success, but not this huge success. Tom Brady has way more success leaving than an assistant coach from Bill Belichick. So hiring another coach from Andy Reid's coaching tree may not be the best, and that's okay. They can stay coaching for him, but it's an organization leader that has to build a culture. Matt Nagy didn't see that with Andy Reid. Now, if he'd been with Andy Reid for maybe 5 years, you'd get to see that. He was trying to do it willy-nilly. So that's another name. Now, here's a name that I'm going to sit here and say right now that they should stay away from, and that's Ryan Day. Ryan Day's name has been thrown around, right, this whole year to be the Bears head coach. And the only reason why his name gets brought up, well, he coached Justin Fields in college. Who gives a shit if he coached him in college? Who cares? And again, watching the Urban Meyer experiment at the Jacksonville Jaguars, don't hire another Ohio State guy as your head coach. I'm not saying Ryan Day is going to have sticky fingers like Urban Meyer in his whiskey place. In this article, there's no indication that Ryan Day has any intention of leaving Ohio State for the NFL. He's a popular head coaching candidate for the Bears, given that he coached Fields for 2 years. If there is ever going to be an attractive reason for Day to make that jump to the NFL, after serving as a quarterbacks coach with the Eagles and 49ers 2015 and 2016, it'd be to the Bears, where he knows he has his quarterback in place. Day might be friends with Nagy, as Day was the one who told Nagy that Fields would be a star, but don't hold that against him. They say Ryan Day is his offensive guru. And we've got to be careful again, because we labeled Matt Nagy as an offensive guru. Ryan Day does call good offenses in college. And he, had a little stint in the NFL to see what it's like, just a hair. I don't know if that's the best hire. And I'm going to say don't hire Ryan Day. That's a good college coach. And I think he would have to get some NFL assistant experience more before you hire him as a head coach. Now, I'm not even going to comment even more. Just because he coached the guy in college doesn't mean that he could go to the NFL and be like, okay, we're going to do everything I did in college into the NFL, which some things are working. We're seeing RPOs. We're seeing, a lot of that stuff for years. Doug Peterson was big with it at the Eagles. Now, I'm not saying you don't hire somebody from the Andy Reid coaching tree. I'd be totally fine with Coach being hired. I just think they'd really have to interview him and really look at the overall body of work and put more effort into it than they did with Matt Nagy. I'd be perfectly fine with that hire because he has more years. I'm just saying should be more thought to and a little bit of a hesitation before they think about it, because you just hired somebody from the Chiefs. So I don't know. I would be totally fine with it, though. But Ryan Day need to stay away from that. Just because he coached the guy in college doesn't mean that he's going to jump in the NFL and coach in the NFL. Kind of like when they say Dan Mullen's going to go to the NFL. What makes you think he could? He's a great offensive mind, but he's not going to go be a head coach or anything else. He's like, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. At the end of the day, I just don't know how some of that works. Coach Panini, great. I would be fine with that. I'm just saying, just a little hesitation, a little more thought. But I'd be totally fine with that hire. Totally fine with that hire. There's a couple other names thrown around. We don't really have to get into, like Pat Fitzgerald. He's not leaving Northwestern. I know they had a terrible year. He is not leaving. Totally not leaving. Now, I've said this name already. A guy I've said, and some people are coming after me, I just think, Dan Mullen could probably be an offensive coordinator. I just don't agree with people saying he's going to be a head coach. No, you've got to go be an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or anything in the NFL before you realize. And that's why the Urban Meyer thing didn't make sense to me. And that's why even some of these hires they make, they don't, I don't know. And you've got to be a CEO. And, watching Dan Mullen try to be a CEO, he just doesn't like to recruit. And maybe that's why he's going to be better in the NFL if he gets an offensive coordinator job. Exactly. He's going to have to earn his stripes. But a guy I think that needs to be considered is, and I just talked about the Chiefs and the Andy Reid coaching tree, but is Doug Peterson. I think that's a guy that you should at least glance at. And the reason why I think you should glance at him, I know he's the Andy Reid coaching tree, but he's not a Chiefs right now. And it's been years. Like, he went to the Eagles and got to be a head coach. Matt Nagy, now, if Matt Nagy had been a head coach, when coach for Andy Reid, was an offense coordinator for a year, that'd be a little different. That's why the Coach Panini hire, if they hired him, I'd be like, okay, cool. He's going to be able to reach Justin Fields. He's going to be able to have an offense out there that does something. I agree. I think that could work 100%. Ryan Day, I'm going to say this real quick. Justin Fields is a one-read quarterback. If you watch the film, he's a 1 to 2 read top quarterback, and he's not getting pressured because he's playing Purdue and Indiana. And I love my Illinois Fighting Illini. I'm an Illinois fan, but they're playing like Illinois or they're playing so-and-so. So he's not getting pressure. He's able to take off and be an athlete. And then sometimes Ryan Day wants to call things just for certain people. There was times, well, and also, you get to recruit, and Ryan Day can recruit. When Justin Fields, he had 2 running backs that averaged over 150 yards apiece. So when you got 2 running backs trying to get you 300 yards on the ground, it opens up the pass. I watched that kid overthrow posts sometimes left and right by 10 yards. And not all college systems are going to work in the NFL. You can take pieces. You can have pieces of the air raid. You can have pieces of RPO stuff in there, but it can't be a full thing. And that's what you saw Doug Peterson do back when he was with the Eagles. And he'd take bits and pieces of them and play quarterback. So he understands maybe he can reach this. I just think that's a guy that needs to be considered. One, because of the stuff he was doing with the Eagles. They were doing some zone stuff. They were doing a little bit of RPO stuff and hard play action stuff. He would move the pocket, and he was doing it with fractured both ankles at the exact same time Carson Wentz. So I think Doug Pearson just has to be considered. And, the wins and losses, they're not all 100% there, but they had a lot of injuries, a ton of injuries. And I think you would be able to keep Nick Foles. Now, I know already. Well, if they hired Doug Peterson, Nick Foles would probably be the guy starting. No, not necessarily. But I think some of the stuff that he did with Carson Wentz and even with a Nick Foles, imagine if you could do that with Justin Fields. I think that would just be fantastic. In 2016, his first year being the head coach for the Eagles, they went 7-9, and then they went 13-3 and won the Super Bowl. Then they go 9-7, 9-7, 4-11. And then, Carson Wentz were going out and him are butting heads. And then they, just tons of injuries all over the place. Hard for that to bounce back. And we've seen what happens when you win a championship like Ed Ogeron. You win a championship and a year and a half, 2 years later, you're fired. So I think that's just a guy you have to look at if you're looking to fix the offense. And then this is said right here. Look at some of the head coaches that have success. They are defensive guys. And then what sucks is, and somebody out there can correct me if I'm wrong, we tried a defensive-minded guy. I think Fox was a defensive-minded guy. We brought him in and we saw what happened. We really don't do much. So the Bears just can't seem to figure it out. But I think, if you could find a defensive guy, great. But then we got to figure out the woes. The Bears defense has always been fine, but we've got to find a guy that could come in and kind of be a CEO type and figure out the offense at the same time. Keep the defensive staff. They're doing fantastic with what they have. I just think Doug Peterson should be considered. You do win a Super Bowl, but once you win a Super Bowl, it could be a younger guy. I just don't know. The only younger guy out there a little bit is Moore. But again, is he too young? I don't know who that could be. Is there a college coach out there you can bring in and be a head coach? But you got to be careful when you bring in college guys as head coaches. We've seen what happens with Chip Kelly's of the world and everything. But I don't really know who you could bring in that's really that young and energetic that's going to be flying around. I mean, Doug Peterson, he'll be, 53? It's not too old. And he's very lively on the sideline, offensive-minded. You let your defense do their thing. It could be like the 85 Bears. Defense, you do your thing. We're going to do our thing here on offense. And just the stuff he did on offense, I think could really fit with Justin Fields and the Bears. I think it would bring in fresh life. Now, anything, that's not the guy. It's just his name, I don't think is brought up enough. Now, I think he's friends with Nagy. He was seen back in August, I believe, at one of the practices in Bears stuff. So I think he actually might be interested in the job. I think that would be a good thing to do. But again, if we're looking, and there's coaches out there that we don't know or that's under the radar of who they can hire. While we're on the subject, another guy real quick as we're slowly wrapping up is a part of me wanted the Saints to have a real bad year and Sean Payton decide to come home. He's from the suburbs, Naperville Central High School, I believe. He went to EIU in Illinois. I think that's a guy that come in and really could be a CEO and fix the offense. Is Sean Payton, but you have to get rid of this. He loves the Saints. He loves New Orleans. He loves helping them. But I think that's another guy that could come in offensively because the whole thing we're complaining about is offense and trying to be a guy to manage a team. Sean Payton has proven that he can do that. He can handle anything, anything at all. So Sean Payton out there, if the Saints could be done, that's another guy that could come in, really be a CEO type, and also be pretty good at calling offensive plays with, who he has had. He has Drew Brees, the type of stuff he's done this year. Those are just names that could be, Sean Payton, you couldn't pay him to leave. No, but I'm just saying, I was kind of hoping things would go bad in St. Louis, New Orleans, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, this is home. The suburbs are home to him. He's a Bears fan growing up. It's a coming home thing. Maybe you bring him on board. And if you really want to fix the CEO problems and offensive woes and how to build an organization, and if you can handle getting through that through a hurricane type like Katrina, that could really fix some problems there. So these are just names to be thrown out there. But they just, I'd be okay if they got rid of Matt Nagy today and try to get one of these coaches in soon. And yeah. So these are just some names being thrown around for the Chicago Bears job. Again, I don't like calling for people's jobs, but this is NFL. There's a time and place where we've just got to, start making these decisions, start getting a different coach in. And a part of it's exciting. A part of it is trying to get a new breath of fresh air. There's a lot of things they've got to fix with the Bears organization, and everything else. But some of those names be thrown around. Just don't hire Ryan Day, please and thank you. Stay away from any Ohio State coach. After we've seen what Urban Meyer did, we don't need sticky fingers in the city of Chicago and the Chicago Bears. But yep, that wraps up this little short episode. Again, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow the podcast. It's literally anywhere you can find your podcast. Coach Steve Show. Follow it, rate it, be a friend, tell a friend. Going to try to do more podcast stuff on Colorcast. Go check out Colorcast. Playing around with it. Once I figure everything out, it should be better. Try to do live podcasts and everything. So go check that out. Thank you all for listening. Again, be a friend, tell a friend. Go check out all the affiliates in the description below. Thank you guys so much. And until next time, this has been another episode of the Coach Steve Show podcast. And like Matt Nagy, we are out of here.